Elias Mercer had cleaned the North Harbor Ocean Gallery for 6 years, and in all that time, he had learned one truth about the sea. It watched back. Most people came to the aquarium to admire the giant viewing walls, the shimmering schools of silver fish, the drifting jellyfish, and the slow, graceful shadows of rays moving like living silk through blue water. But Elias had always felt something deeper in that place, something old, patient, and impossibly aware. Every morning before sunrise, he walked the same silent corridor with his bucket, his mop, and the ring of keys at his waist, and every morning the largest tank in the building greeted him with that same vast, dark stillness, as if the whole ocean were holding its breath behind glass. That tank was called Pelagic Crown, a chamber so enormous that visitors often stood speechless in front of it. Its water rose like a moving wall into the dim heights of the building, filled with sharks, manta rays, deep-water eels, moon jellyfish, and creatures that seemed less like animals and more like rumors given shape. Elias liked the hours before opening, when the gift shop lights were off, the food court was quiet, and the footsteps of the city had not yet entered the building. In those hours, the aquarium felt sacred, and the sound of his mop across the polished floor felt almost rude. On the first morning he found her, he thought she was some kind of exhibit prop left behind by a careless events team. She was sitting near the base of the pelagic crown glass, knees drawn to her chest, small enough to be mistaken for a doll at first glance. Her skin glowed with a soft blue light, not bright, not artificial, but gentle, like moonlight trapped beneath clear water. Her pale hair fell past her shoulders in fine strands the color of cold cyan, and her eyes, impossibly large and dark, reflected the movement of the tank behind her. Elias stopped so suddenly that the bucket handle slipped from his fingers and clattered against the floor. The little girl turned her head toward him. She did not panic. She did not run. She simply looked at him with the exhausted stillness of something that had already been running too long. Elias felt the hair rise on his arms. No child should have been in the building before opening. No child could have gotten past security, and no child in the world looked like that. He crouched slowly, hands open, trying not to frighten her. "Hey," he whispered, though his voice sounded strangely small in the enormous blue hall. "Are you hurt?" The girl said nothing. Her gaze shifted to the packet of plain crackers sticking from the side pocket of his cleaning cart. Elias followed her eyes, then looked back at her. "You hungry?" She blinked once. That was enough. He took out a cracker and held it toward her, but did not move closer. She studied him first, then the food, then reached out with a tiny trembling hand and took it for his fingers. Her skin was cool, not cold, and a soft light passed beneath it like bioluminescence moving through shallow water. She ate in small, careful bites, never taking her eyes off him. Elias should have called security that second. He knew that, but something in him refused. The feeling was not fear exactly, it was protection, immediate and irrational, the kind that rises before thought can catch it. So instead he stayed there on one knee, holding another cracker, and waited until she reached for that too. Behind the glass, something massive moved. A dark shape crossed the upper water like a storm cloud, too large, too deliberate. One of the older blacktip reef hybrids from the deep section, yet even that should not have caused the silence that followed. The smaller fish scattered instantly. The rays turned sharply, and even the jellyfish seemed to drift away from the center of the tank. The little girl turned toward the glass. For one strange second, the great creature on the other side turned too, and Elias had the horrible feeling that they recognized each other. He took her to the maintenance room after that, not because he had a plan, but because he needed time to think. He wrapped her in a clean thermal blanket from the first aid cabinet, gave her water in a paper cup, and tried asking the obvious questions. "What is your name? Where are your parents? How did you get in here? Can you speak English?" She did not answer any of them. But when he sat down on the floor beside her and broke another cracker in half, she edged a little closer. That was how the first day began. A strange, silent child with glowing skin, hidden inside the maintenance corridor of the largest aquarium in the city, while one exhausted cleaner lied to everyone who passed by and said he was behind schedule on glass treatment. He told himself he would report her once he understood what he was looking at. Then he made the mistake that changed everything. He cared. On the second day, she was still there. Elias had gone home with almost no sleep, expecting the whole thing to turn illogic by morning. Maybe a fever dream, maybe stress, maybe a child from some advanced medical case or escaped private laboratory. But when he unlocked the maintenance room before dawn, she was curled asleep beneath the thermal blanket, breathing lightly, glowing faintly in the darkness. And when she opened her eyes and saw him, she did something small, simple, and devastating. She smiled. It was not a big smile, just a fragile lift at the corners of her mouth. But it was enough to split open whatever caution he had left. He brought fruit that morning, some cut melon from his staff fridge, a soft bread roll, a bottle of water, and she ate with slightly less fear than before, watching him the whole time, studying his face like she was learning the weather from it. He tried to call her something, because speaking to her as nothing felt wrong. After a while he settled on Marina, half joking to himself that a child found beside a giant ocean tank deserved a sea name. When he said it, she looked up sharply. Then she touched her own chest with small fingers and whispered, so softly he almost missed it. "Rena." Elias froze. "You can talk." She lowered her eyes and said nothing else. But from then on, in his mind, she was Rena. That same morning, strange things began happening inside Pelagic Crown. The marine biologists reported unusual formation behavior in several species. Sharks moving in synchronized loops, rays circling the glass in repeated patterns, schools of fish compressing into dense spirals, even a jellyfish drifting toward one side of the tank as if pulled by a current no instrument could detect. By noon, word had spread among the staff that the main tank was acting haunted. Elias laughed it off with the others, but every time he passed the glass, he felt eyes on him, not one pair, thousands. That afternoon, he found Rena standing near the maintenance door, staring toward the distant sound of water pumps and filtered waves. "You should stay hidden," he told her gently. She looked up at him, and for the first time there was fear in her face. Not fear of him, fear of something else, something coming closer. Night fell, and the aquarium emptied, but Elias did not leave until he was sure no one had seen her. Before going, he placed a folded towel beside her, left more food, and hesitated at the door. "I will come back tomorrow," he said. Rena looked at him with those deep dark eyes, then asked in a voice barely above breath, 3 days. Elias frowned, not understanding. "What?" Her lips moved carefully, as if the words were not natural to her. "Safe, 3 days. Then she pressed both hands over her heart and curled inward again. Elias stood there longer than he should have, uneasy without knowing why. On the third day, the ocean began to press against the building. Not literally at first, not in any way that would make the morning news, but the signs were there. Every tank in the facility showed agitation before sunrise, not just Pelagic Crown. The seals refused to surface for feeding, the octopuses vanished into the deepest corners of their habitats. The touch pool rays huddled beneath the rocks, and in the dark cylindrical tank at the center rotunda, hundreds of sardines moved in such tight, perfect formation that they resembled a single shining organism with one mind. The staff joked about a storm offshore. There was no storm on the forecast. Elias found Rena awake and standing this time, barefoot on the cold concrete floor, facing the wall as though she could hear something far beyond it. Her blue glow was stronger than before. He offered breakfast, but she did not take it immediately. Instead, she turned and asked him a question that seemed far too old for a face that small. "Why humankind?" Elias swallowed. "I do not know what you mean." She tilted her head, searching for words, then asked again, softer this time, "Why kind to me?" The answer came out before he could shape it. "Because you looked like no one had been kind to you in a long time." Rena stared at him, and for a second her eyes shimmered, not with tears exactly, but with some luminous deep-water sadness he had no name for. Then she took the bread from his hand and ate slowly. Later that day, Elias almost got caught. A security supervisor noticed the extra food missing from staff storage and started checking maintenance areas. Elias had just enough time to lead Rena through a narrow service passage behind the filtration wing. The passage opened into an unused observation alcove with a small circular window looking into the edge of Pelagic Crown, hidden from public view. There they waited together in silence while security footsteps passed. Through the little window, a shape emerged from the blue darkness outside. A giant eye, ancient and black, wider than a dinner plate, looked directly through the glass. Elias felt his pulse hammer. The creature beyond the window was not on the species chart. Not in any brochure, not in any official record of the aquarium collection. Its skin was dark as the trench, its snout long and scarred, its body far larger than any shark that should have fit inside the tank. And it held still, impossibly still, as if it were peering into a cradle. Rena stepped toward the glass. The creature bowed its head. Elias backed away. "What are you?" he whispered. Rena did not answer. The eye beyond the glass closed once, slow and solemn. Then the creature disappeared into blue-black water without leaving a ripple. When the footsteps finally faded, Elias dropped to sit against the wall, all the strength suddenly gone from his legs. "Tell me the truth," he said, voice shaking now, because whatever this is, it is not small anymore. Rena stood beside the round window for a long moment, then turned. "I fell," she said. "From where?" "From below." "Below what?" She seemed frustrated by language, by the clumsy shape of human speech around something too large to fit inside it. She touched the glass lightly, then pointed downward, not to the lower floor, not to the base of the building, but downward in the oldest sense, into depth, pressure, darkness, and ancient water. Elias felt cold. "You came from the ocean." Rena nodded. "And something is looking for you." "Again," she nodded. He almost asked if it would hurt her, but the fear in her face stopped him. Instead, he asked the question that mattered. Will it hurt anyone else? Rena closed her eyes, and when she opened them, the answer was there before the words, "If they fear, yes. If they strike, yes." Elias pressed a hand over his mouth. "Then help me understand," he said, "because I'm trying here. I am really trying." Rena took a breath, and the glow beneath her skin pulsed like distant waves under moonlight. She spoke in fragments, broken but clear enough. Deep families, old water, hidden between heat and dark, not fish, not human, not myth, living where light does not go. She had been small, curious, too near the rise where machines hunted and nets screamed. Something separated her from her own. Currents took her, pain took memory. Then walls, glass, voices, fear. Elias listened without moving. 3 days safe, she repeated, then looked straight at him. 4th day, they come. He should have run to the police, to the Navy, to anyone. But by then there was no one in the world he trusted more than the tiny trembling child in front of him. And that realization terrified him more than any monster in the tank. That night he did not go home. He stayed hidden in the service corridor with Rena while the aquarium dimmed into after-hours blue. He gave her his jacket as a pillow and sat with his back against the wall, listening to pumps throb through the building like a mechanical heartbeat. Around midnight, the power flickered. Just once. Then again, alarms chirped and cut off. Somewhere in the distance, glass boomed under pressure. Elias was on his feet instantly. Rena stood too, not frightened now, only sad. "It is time," she said. The 4th day began before dawn, and the ocean came looking for her. At first it was a sound, not a crash, not an explosion, but a low, immense groan that rolled through the foundations of the aquarium, as if the building itself had been lowered into the chest of something breathing. Then the water in every visible tank began to move the wrong way. Not sloshing, not vibrating, but leaning toward Pelagic Crown. Elias ran with Rena through the dark corridor and into the main gallery. Emergency lights washed the giant hall in red. Shadows jerked across the polished floor, and all along the massive viewing wall the creatures inside the tank had gathered. Thousands of them. Sharks lined the depths in silent ranks. Rays turned in widening circles. Clouds of fish rotated in luminous spirals. Jellyfish burned like drifting lanterns, and in the upper black water, several colossal shapes moved slowly enough to make time feel afraid. Outside, beyond the thick, reinforced structure of the building, the harbor sirens had begun to scream. The sea level alarms were triggering all along the coast. Water surged against the outer walls. Somewhere in the city, people were waking to the impossible sight of the tide climbing without wind. The tank glass before Elias shuddered. Cracks did not spread, not yet, but bright stress lines bloomed across the surface like frozen lightning. He pulled Rena behind him on instinct, and she touched his arm gently, as if even now she did not want him afraid. The largest shape in the tank rose from the deep. It came upward like a mountain deciding to move, dark skin marked with pale scars, one vast eye reflecting the red emergency glow, a head shaped by trenches older than language, and around it the entire living body of the tank rearranged itself in reverence. Elias could not breathe. The creature stopped at the glass. Rena stepped out from behind him. "No," Elias said at once, voice cracking. "No, stay back." She looked up at him, and in that tiny face he saw gratitude so pure it hurt. Then she said the words he would remember for the rest of his life. "You fed me when you did not know my name. You hid me when fear was easier. Deep families remember kindness." The great creature beyond the glass opened its mouth, and the sound that came was not a roar. It was a call, low, layered, mournful, a sound so ancient it bypassed the ears and struck straight into the bones. Every drop of water in the hall trembled. From the corners of the gallery, from the pipes, the drains, even the condensation on the rails, tiny beads of water lifted and quivered in the air, drawn toward Rena like filings to a magnet. She turned toward the glass and raised one small hand. The impossible happened. The crack lines in the viewing wall stopped spreading. The surging water outside the building paused. And all at once Elias understood that whatever stood before him was not just a lost child. She was someone important, not a princess, not in the childish sense, but something deeper, a bloodline carried by abyssal worlds, a living bond between the hidden intelligence below and the fragile violence above. A child whose disappearance had sent currents through miles of ocean and awakened creatures human charts had never named. The emergency doors burst open behind him. Security rushed in first, then senior staff, then two armed harbor officers, all shouting at once, all stopping dead when they saw the wall of gathered life beyond the glass. One officer raised his weapon on pure, terrified instinct. Rena flinched. Elias moved faster than thought and shoved the barrel down. "Do not do that," he shouted, his voice echoing across the chamber. The officer swung toward him in shock, but before anyone could speak, the water outside the building slammed once against the outer structure, hard enough to knock several people off their feet. Lights exploded overhead. The giant creature beyond the glass lowered its scarred head until one vast eye aligned with Elias. He knew, with a certainty that made his knees weak, that the next second would decide whether everyone in that building lived. Rena looked from the eye beyond the glass to the frightened humans behind her. Then she did something no one expected. She stepped backward, back toward Elias, and reached for his hand. The hall went still. Even the alarms seemed to hold their breath. Rena's small, glowing fingers wrapped around his rough, calloused hand. Aquarium cleaner, widower, night shift nobody, a man who had spent half his life invisible. Then she faced the ocean and spoke in a language none of them knew. It sounded like whale song carried through crystal, like pressure and memory and tides speaking at once. The great creature listened. The gathered animals listened. The entire dark mass of water beyond the glass listened. When she finished, the colossal being remained motionless for several long seconds. Then, slowly, solemnly, it lowered its head once more. The ranks of sharks began to turn away. The spirals of fish loosened. The rays descended like falling banners. Outside, the roar of rising water began to recede from the walls of the building. In the harbor beyond, the impossible tide started to sink. People all over the coast would later call it a freak surge, a magnetic event, a seismic anomaly, an unexplained marine phenomenon. But inside that red-lit hall, everyone knew they had just watched the ocean make a choice. The giant creature lingered a moment longer, its eye still fixed on Elias. Not hostile, not grateful in any human way, but aware. Then it vanished into the enormous dark, and the whole living nation behind the glass followed. Silence rushed into the chamber, so suddenly it made several people cry. Rena swayed on her feet. Elias dropped to one knee and caught her before she fell. Her glow had dimmed. "You are leaving," he said, and he hated how broken his voice sounded. She nodded weakly. "Will I see you again?" A sad little smile touched her face. "When water remembers you, you are never gone." He swallowed hard, unable to speak. Around them, staff and officers stood frozen, too shaken to interfere, too confused to understand what rules even meant anymore. Rena lifted one hand to Elias's cheek, tiny and cool. "Kind human," she whispered, then closed her eyes. Water gathered around her bare feet, not pouring from anywhere, not leaking, simply gathering, clear and luminous, winding upward in ribbons around her body. Elias held on at first, panicking, but the water was gentle. It did not tear her away. It lifted. He saw her face one last time through that soft turning brightness. Then she was gone. No esplas. No burst of light. Only a ring of seawater on the polished floor, and one small object left in his palm. A shell. No ordinary shell, but a smooth spiral piece no larger than a coin, dark as midnight, veined through with living blue light. The building survived. The official report was buried beneath layers of institutional language, system irregularities, pressure event, marine behavioral anomaly, electrical cascade, temporary evacuation protocol. But rumors spread anyway. Cleaners talk, guards talk, night technicians talk. And the story of the little blue girl in the aquarium became one of those impossible workplace legends people laugh at until they stand alone before the glass and feel something watching. Elias kept his job. He never told the full truth to anyone. Not because he feared being called insane, but because some moments become smaller when spoken by the wrong mouths. Weeks passed, then months. The harbor returned to normal. Pelagic Crown returned to its rhythms. Families came to stare at sharks and jellyfish and glowing rays. Children pressed sticky hands to the glass. Teenagers took pictures. Tourists bought plush octopuses in the gift shop. And every morning before sunrise, Elias still walked the silent corridor with his bucket and mop. But now he always paused before the great tank. Sometimes nothing happened. Sometimes a single ray would drift close, lingering longer than seemed natural. Sometimes schools of fish would form a spiral for a few brief seconds before scattering again. And sometimes, on the quietest mornings, a tiny, glowing handprint would appear on the inside of the glass near the floor. Always gone by the time the first visitors arrived. Elias never wiped it away immediately. He would stand there with his hand over the shell in his pocket and smile into the blue silence. Because somewhere beneath shipping routes and storms, beneath sonar and steel hulls and all the arrogant maps of men, there was a world deeper than fear, older than language, and it had remembered the kindness of one ordinary human being. Then, one winter morning, nearly a year later, the shell in his pocket grew warm. Elias stopped walking. Across the glass of Pelagic Crown, all the creatures in the tank turned in the same direction at once. From the black water in the upper depths, a small familiar glow began drifting downward. And for the first time in months, Elias heard a voice behind him that made his heart forget how to beat. "I came back hungry," she said.